if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? Now, that sounds insulting, but I promise you it's not. Okay. It's the question every capable expert eventually has to answer. Because if your knowledge is real, your experience is valuable, and your work actually helps people, then at some point you've got to ask why the market isn't treating you like the obvious choice that you should be. Why are people with less experience getting more attention? Why are people with old, worn out ideas making more money? Why does the person who understands the problem at the deepest level struggle to explain why anybody should pay them for it? That gap is not random. And it's not because the market hates depth either. It's because expertise has a translation problem. What's clear to you isn't automatically clear to the buyer. What's valuable inside your own head isn't automatically valuable to the market, right? And the smarter you are, the more dangerous this gets, because the more you know, the harder it is to remember what it felt like to not know this stuff. That's called the curse of knowledge. And I saw it happen all the time in one of the weirdest classrooms imaginable, a magic shop. Hi there, I'm Jonathan W. Pritchard, and for more than 20 years, I've worked as a professional mind reader on stages, in boardrooms, at trade shows, and inside the highest stakes business conversations on planet Earth. And before all of that, I worked at a magic shop at Universal Studios in Orlando, which means I got to watch people run face first into the curse of knowledge all day long. So here's how it would go. Somebody would come into the shop, we'd show them a trick, their face would light up, they'd laugh, they'd grab their friend, "Hey man, come on over, you got to see this. Do that again." Then we'd do it again, and now they had to know how this works. All right, they were hooked. They needed the secret. They wanted the method. They wanted the thing behind the curtain. And then they'd remember, "Oh yeah, this trick is for sale." $19.99 later, they had it in their grubby little hands. So they bought it, they'd open up the instructions, read through it, they'd learn exactly how it works, and instantly they would say some version of, "This'll never fool anybody," which is insane, right? Because it fooled them 5 minutes ago. It fooled them $19.99 worth, right? Nothing changed about the trick. The props didn't change. The method wasn't different. The effect didn't change. The only thing that changed was their relationship to the information. 5 minutes earlier, they were amazed. 5 minutes later, they're embarrassed that they had been amazed. And I just want to clear up that they weren't saying, "This is too difficult for me, I won't be able to do this." No, they were saying, "Nobody will be amazed by this." Right? That's a very important distinction to make. The instant that they learned the secret, their brain couldn't access the feeling of not knowing the secret anymore. So now the method felt obvious. And because it felt obvious to them, they assumed it would be obvious to everybody else, which is a bizarre form of narcissism that because I know a thing, everybody else will know the thing too. But that's the curse of knowledge in real time. Once you know something, your mind struggles to imagine what it's like to not know it. And then once that happens, you start devaluing the thing you know. Experts do this all the time, right? They learn something, they might practice it for years. They might have even gone to 12 years of school to be a world-class expert at this. You've got instincts around this. They see patterns before other people can see them. They can make distinctions that other people can't even imagine. They can solve problems that used to be super confusing. And then, eventually, they look at their own expertise and think, everybody knows this. This isn't special. It's too simple, right? Nobody would pay for this. discounting the years they spent to learn to get good at this thing. And they still think, nobody would pay for this. I can't charge for something this obvious, but it's only obvious because they already know it. That's the trap. Your expertise feels obvious from the inside because you paid the price to make it obvious. But to the person who hasn't paid that price yet, it might be the exact thing standing between them and the result that they want. Okay? You're comparing the value of your knowledge to how hard it feels for you to access it right now. The buyer is comparing the value of your knowledge to the pain of not having it. Those are completely different calculations. This is why smart experts stay broke. Not because they're not valuable, not because their knowledge is weak, not because the market only rewards shallow people. Smart experts stay broke because they confuse being familiar with being low value. They already know the method, so they think the method's cheap. They already know the answer, so they think the answer's obvious. They know the path, so they assume the path is easy to walk. But the person buying from you doesn't live inside your nervous system. They don't have your pattern recognition. They don't have your battle scars. They don't have the bazillion reps you put in to get good. They don't have your years of trial and error compressed down into an instant instinct, right? They have a problem. And if your expertise helps them solve that problem faster, cleaner, with less risk, then your expertise has market value. Okay. The issue isn't whether you know something valuable. The issue is whether the market can recognize the value before you've drowned them in over explanation. So, this is where smart people make the next mistake. They try to prove value by explaining more. Maybe it's more detail or more nuance, more methodology, more context, more backstory, more credentials, more caveats, more philosophy, more of the whole operating system. Well, that kind of makes sense, but in this one edge case that happens one in a million times, right? All of that stuff makes sense from the expert's side of the table because the expert knows all the moving pieces and how they fit, and they understand all the complexity. They know where beginners oversimplify things and the problems that can create. They do understand all those exceptions. They know where all the bodies are buried. So when somebody asks, "So, what do you do?" the expert tries to answer accurately, and accuracy becomes the enemy of clarity because the buyer isn't ready for the whole machine, right? They're not asking for that. They're just trying to figure out one thing. Is this for me? That's it. That's the first gate. That's all. Before they can care about your framework, your background, your philosophy, your clever terminology, your process, they need to know whether you're talking about a problem that they actually recognize having. Okay. And most experts skip that step. They start explaining the mechanism before the person feels the pain of having the problem your mechanism solves, right? They start teaching before the buyers even agreed that there's something worth learning here. They start proving intelligence before the buyer understands the result that all those smarts could make possible. And that's how expertise gets trapped inside your head. The market doesn't pay you because you're smart. The market pays when your smarts are legible. That word matters. Legible. Can people read what you are the answer to? Can they understand who you help? Can they understand what problem you solve? Can they understand why that problem matters now? Can they understand why you're the right person. Can they understand what happens next? If they can't, your expertise might be real, but it's not a business yet. It's potential energy. It's a locked room full of value, but the buyer can't buy what they can't see or understand. Okay. And they can't understand what you haven't translated for them. That's the expert monetization problem. You've got value, but the value has to be visible. Then it can be trusted. Then it has to be packaged up. Then it has to be easy to use or act on or buy. Okay. That's the path from smart to paid. And it's not automatic. Okay? This is why the most knowledgeable person in the room is often not the highest paid person in the room. The highest paid person is the person who can make the value easiest to understand, easiest to trust, and easiest to buy. That doesn't mean they're better. It just means they're more legible to the market. And this annoys smart people, pisses you right off, if you're being honest. Because smart people look at somebody less nuanced, less experienced, less technically impressive, and then they think, how are they getting clients? How are they getting attention? How are they charging that much? How are people taking them seriously? Don't they see that they're a hack? And sometimes the answer is very annoying. They're better at making the value obvious. That's it. They're better at naming the problem. They're better at packaging up the outcome, making it look real attractive. They're better at creating trust before explanation. They're better at giving people a clear next step. That doesn't mean you need to become shallow. That is not what I'm saying. All right. It means you need to stop making depth do a job it was never designed to do in the first place. Depth is not the front door. Clarity is the front door. Depth is what they discover after they walk in. So, this is the same thing that happens in magic. The audience doesn't care how complicated the method is. They care about the effect, the fun thing they get to experience. They care about the experience. That's it. They care about what happens in their mind, not what you're thinking about. Like, if the magician leads with the method, there is zero magic. Okay? Like, that sounds insane, but think of it this way. Like, if the magician says, this trick works because of a false transfer, time misdirection, retention of vision, audience management, and a subtle discrepancy hidden in the offbeat, nobody cares. It might be accurate, but it's also a horrible performance. All right? The audience needs the effect first. Then maybe if they become obsessed with magic, then they might care about the method. Experts do this exactly backwards. They lead with the method. They lead with the credentials. They lead with the years of thinking, right? They lead with their custom model. They lead with the complexity. Then they wonder why people aren't leaning forward, hanging off every one of their words, right? The market needs the effect first. What changes for me? What pain goes away after working with you? What's easier working with you? What's possible working with you? What costly mistake do I stop making because I paid you? What decision gets clearer? What result can I trust you to help me create? That's what the buyer's trying to understand. And this is where the curse of knowledge becomes super expensive. Because once your expertise feels obvious to you, you stop packaging it with enough care. You assume people understand the stakes that are at play. They don't. Like, you're assuming people understand the cost of the problem. They don't know that either. You assume people understand why your approach is different from everybody else. They certainly don't know that. That's for sure. You assume people can connect the dots because the dots are obvious to you, but they're obvious to you because you connected them years ago. You've had years of experience of understanding how they go together. So instead of building a bridge, you stand on the other side yelling, "It's right here." Okay. And the buyer is still stuck across the gap from where it is they want to be. That gap is where money disappears. Not because they hate you, not because they're stupid. And believe me, I know for a fact you've called people stupid because they're not smart enough to see how smart you are. Right? Like, put it in the comments if that's you. Right? Because it's not any of that stuff. And it's not because they don't value expertise, but because they can't buy the thing you haven't made clear yet. So the real question isn't, am I smart enough? It's, have I turned what I know into something that the market can recognize, trust, and act on? That requires business architecture. You need positioning because positioning answers what are you the answer to? Not everything you can do, not every problem you can solve, not the full range of your intelligence as a human being on planet Earth. It's the sharp, clear place where your expertise becomes relevant to a specific kind of person with a specific kind of problem. You need an offer next, right? Because the offer answers, what result are they buying? What are they giving you money for? And it's not your time, it's not your brain, not access to how complex you can make things. They're paying for a specific path toward a specific improvement of what they actually want. Next, you need proof. Proof answers, why should they believe you? Not because you say you're good, not because you've been doing this for years. I've met plenty of people that have been doing stuff for years and they're really bad at it still. Okay. So years isn't a combined 100 years of experience. That doesn't tell me you're good because your background stories, your results, your examples, and observations make risk lower in their mind. Then you need content. Content answers, why should they pay attention before they're ready to buy from you? Okay. Not content that performs expertise for other experts. That's a huge one. Okay. Because a lot of experts would be like, oh, well, my colleagues would never put it that way. And like, are you selling to your colleagues? No. Then shut up. Put it out there. Because content that makes the right person feel seen, understood, and more aware of the problem that you solve is awesome. Okay. That helps you find clients. Finding clients, it helps you because where are the people who already have the problem, already feel the pain, already have a reason to care right now, not later, right now? Where are they? Because the fastest way to make expertise profitable is not to convince random people to care. That's playing on hard mode. Easy mode is to find the people who already are much closer to caring than everybody else. Easy, right? That's the business built on top of your expertise as the foundation. Positioning, offer, proof, content, having conversations with clients, right? That's the difference between being smart and being paid for being smart. Big difference. And this is why, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? Isn't an insult. It's a diagnostic question. It it forces you to separate two things that most experts keep putting together, right? The value of your knowledge and the market's ability to understand that value. Those are not the same thing. You can be brilliant and invisible. You can be useful and unclear. You can be experienced and hard to buy. You can be right and still not trusted. That's a bummer, right? You can have the answer and still fail to help the audience do anything about it. That's the whole problem. Because business doesn't reward what's in your head. Business rewards what gets transferred from your head into the market, from your experience into a clear message, from your insight into an offer, from your skill into proof, from your understanding into a buying decision. That transfer is the work. Most experts have never been taught how to do it. They were taught to get good, let the work speak for itself. They were taught to study. They were taught to practice. They were taught to become undeniable at the work itself, be so good they can't ignore you. Sorry, Steve. That matters. I'm not saying it doesn't, but after a certain point, getting better at a skill is not the bottleneck between why you're broke. All right. The bottleneck is helping the market understand why the skill matters to them. That's the part most people, the smart people, resist because it feels like marketing. It feels like icky sales. It feels like self promotion. It feels like taking something deep and then cheapening it and making it smaller. But when you do it right, that's not what's happening. You're not shrinking your expertise, you're building the doorway into it. A doorway isn't the whole building, but without the door, nobody can get inside, right? This is what the whole Expert Monetization Series is about. Not hype, not guru nonsense, not pretending every skill should become a 7-figure empire, the 2 comma club. It's about what happens when somebody has real expertise, real experience, real value, and still hasn't built the bridge between what they know and what the market can buy. Okay. And if that's you, the next step is super simple. I built a whole bunch of custom agents that help you build that bridge faster. So it helps you turn what you know into positioning, offers, proof, content, and client finding assets that turn it into a business. So it's basically a business in a box, and it's a digital clone of the exact work that companies like BP, State Farm, United Airlines, Pure Storage, exactly those companies bring me in to do that work when they need people to understand, trust, communicate, sell, and decide at higher levels. So you can get it at the link in the pinned comment and in the description. That page will point you to wherever it is that you can get it. So even if I can get it to you a different way in the future, that URL will always be the same. Okay, so go there, check it out. And in the next video, we're going to go one layer deeper because before somebody pays for your expertise, they have to trust it. And the weird part is they start deciding whether they can trust you before they fully understand what it is that you do. So that's where the next video starts, and I will see you right here.